All right. So we are approaching Tisha Above, and Mitzvah Hashem, as the Navi Zechariah says, it should be a day that Yeh Lebitz Yehuda L'Sasim L'Simcha, that it should be a day for all of Klal Yisrael. That's a joyous day, a happy day. It should be a holiday. We're going to come back to that towards the end of the class this evening. A fascinating Chassam Sofer related to that. But just to give us some context, we're about to enter into what could be a fast day. Hopefully won't be, but could be a fast day we've experienced in the past. But just to understand exactly the whole purpose of fast days in general, the structure of them from a halachic sense as well, is important in order to help us better appreciate the tzom, to better appreciate the fast day. Like, I'll never forget the first time that I learned through Masechah Sukkah, that Sukkahs following my completion of the Masechta, it was like a completely different yantiv. Because when you understand the framework, you understand the mitzvos, so it helps you appreciate it more. So hopefully we'll be able to appreciate Tisha B'Av more after we go through some of the basic sources, some of the primary sources to help us understand the yantiv. So let's begin on page number 1. We'll go through the sources outside as well for those that do not have it. So the Torah tells us in Sefer Bamidbar in Parshas Bahaloska, not too long ago, a couple months ago, we read in the Torah in Parshas Bahaloska in the 10th parak of Sefer Bamidbar, V'chi tavo milchama ba'artzachem, that when a war comes to your city, into your land, al hatzar hatzoer etchem, and any tragedy, any trouble that comes your way, v'ha'artam b'chatzotros. So we're supposed to blow the chatzotros, the trumpets. V'niskartem lifnei Hashem Elokechem, and that way we remember Hashem. V'nisha'atem me'oivechem, and you will be saved from your enemies. There are other times that we blow the chatzotros as well. We blow the chatzotros whenever Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to call a meeting at Ol Moed for all of Klal Yisrael to come and meet at the meeting tent. When it was time for the camp to move, they blew the chatzotros. Depending on what the occasion was, depends on how many blasts they blew, the type of blast that they blew. That's what another example is in the next pasuk, in pasuk Yud, verse 10. Ubeyom simchatchem u'moadechem roshei chadshechem on Shabbos and Yantiv Rosh Chodesh takatem bechatzotros. That is another time that we blew the chatzotros. Al lotechem, when we brought the karbanos to the Beis Hamikdash. Again, it's lezikaron, for us to remember lifnei Hashem Elokechem, for us to be focused again for Hashem. So the Rambam in Hilchos Ta'anios, the Rambam in his Mishnah Torah, where he codifies all Jewish law. So in the third volume, the third volume of his 14-volume work of the Mishnah Torah, the third volume is Zmanim, dealing with all of the times of the year. And there he talks about the laws of Ta'anios, of fast days. Now, fast days are not only, as the Rambam is going to introduce, are not only related to specific times of the year, but also will relate to circumstances. Like, for example, the Gemara talks a lot in great detail in Maseches Taanis of fasts that one would take upon themselves, or a congregation would take upon themselves if there is no rain and there's a drought. So in order to beseech Hashem, in order to create a sense of teshuvah, so you would fast then also. There are other times a person may fast. They may want to take upon a fast upon themselves as an individual. So it's not necessarily around certain times of the year, but presumably, because of the fact that there are communal fasts that take place during specific times of the year, that's why the Rambam included the laws of fasting in Sefer Zmanim, which has to do with different times of the year. So the Rambam writes in the beginning of Hilchos Ta'anios, mitzvos aseh min haTorah liz'ok ulahariya bechatzotros al kotzar shetavo al tzibur, that there is an obligation, a commandment from the Torah to blow the chatzotros, to blow the trumpets Whenever chas v'chalila there is a tzara, there is a trouble that comes to the tzibor, that comes to the community. Shana Amar, as we just read in the Torah, al hatzar hatzorer etchem v'harotem b'chatzotros. For any tragedy that comes to the congregation, you blow the chatzotros. Kolomar, kol davar sheyitzar lachem, anything that troubles and pains you, could go in bitzaros v'dever v'arbe, even a pandemic, for example, the Rambam says, or any sort of infestation, something that is causing a lot of trouble, that you're supposed to blow the trumpets, and you're supposed to blow them, and it's supposed to create this sense of fervor for the Jewish people. Says the Rambam in Halacha Beis exactly that. This is a way to start going on the path of Teshuvah. Shebizman shetavo tzara, because the time that a tragedy comes, v'zaku aleha, and you blow the trumpets, v'yaru yedu hakol shebegla ma'asim harayim, that everyone knows that it's because of our evil ways this tragedy is coming our way. Rahman al-Islam, a million times we know of these terrible tragedies that have happened over the last year and a half. Of course, the pandemic and Miami, Meron, the war with Hamas, v'chule, etc., etc., etc. There are many tragedies that are happening all over the world, and they are too numerous to count. And the ripple effects are infinitely greater and compounded, and it's horrific. So all of this is a message from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore we need to wake ourselves up. And that is what the chatzotros, the trumpets, were designed to do. Today we don't have the trumpets, so what do we do instead? So take a look at the bottom of the page, across from the arrow, in Halacha Dalid, the fourth entry in the first parak of Hilchos Tanis. The Rambam writes, "Midivrei sofrim lesanos al kotzara shetavu al tzibur." And from the rabbis, they instituted that a replacement, a way to accomplish the same idea of to put you on the path of teshuvah would be to fast. Whenever you have a fast, it's supposed to focus you in order to better yourself, to do teshuvah, to reconnect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu when a tzara, when a tragedy comes. Shetavo al tzibur ad shirachmu min hashamayim, until HaKadosh Baruch Hu has mercy on us. And that is really the design of fast days in general. Take a look on the next page. It's labeled as page 3. That was my mistake. Page 2 is there somewhere, but it's not in your packet and it's not in my packet. The Rambam writes in the beginning of the 5th chapter in Hilchos Tanios, he begins to talk about the fast days that we are familiar with, the communal fast days related to something historic that happened, a tragedy that happened, where he writes in the first halacha, Yesham Yamim Shekol Yisrael Misanim Behem. There are days that the entire Jewish people fast during them, because of the tragedies that befell the Jewish people during that time. Why? To accomplish exactly what we just spoke about, in order to awaken the hearts, to open up the pathway for teshuvah, in order to remember our evil doings, and the actions of our fathers and forefathers, and the mistakes that we have yet to fix, that we are still committing these crimes, to the point that we are still experiencing these tragedies. That by remembering these tragedies, we're going to go back on the correct path. As avonam, bes avon avosam. That we're supposed to remember the mistakes of our forefathers, but also our mistakes, because they really are one and the same. We know that that's why we don't have a Beis Hamikdash. The Gemara tells us in Maseches Yuma that in the Yerushalmi in Yuma that any generation that does not see the Beis Hamikdash rebuilt, it's as if that generation destroyed it, because it's just logic, right? Had we already fixed our ways, the Beis Hamikdash would be ostensibly. It's as if we destroyed it. It's the same thing. So here we have already an understanding of the framework of what a fast day is supposed to do, and why it is we're fasting related to these tragedies related to Chorban Abayis. Because every time that we come to another one of these days that the Navi Zechariah tells us are really supposed to be joyous days. Mirza Hashem, when the Beis HaMikdash comes, and God willing, we'll be able to see Yerushalayim rebuilt. These are going to be happy days. That Tzom Revi, Tzom Chamishi, Tzom Shvi, Tzom HaAsiri, that the Navi tells us that these 4 fast days of Tzom HaRevi'i, of Shvasar B'Tammuz, Tzom HaChamishi, of Tisha Above, Tzom HaShvi'i, of Tzom Gedalia, and Tzom HaAsiri of Asar B'Teves, that all 4 of those fast days related to the destruction of the temple, that are going to be for the Jewish people days of joy. They're going to be Yomim Tovim. The fact that they are not yet Yomim Tovim means that we have yet to fix our ways. So in reality, fast days are Teshuvah days. That's the whole purpose of them. They're Teshuvah days. That's what they're supposed to do in order so that we can get back on the right path of having proper avas chinam, of correcting our mistakes of the past, of sinah and the like. So these are the this is an introduction to help us frame our conduct for fast days. Now, on Tisha B'Av in particular, there are a number of different things that one cannot do, aside for eating and drinking that one is not allowed to do during any fast day. Tisha B'Av, you're not allowed to eat and drink, but you're also not allowed to engage in anything that would be prohibited for an avel, for someone who is in Shiva. So, Ne'ilas HaSandal, you have to change your shoes. Sicha, you're not allowed to anoint yourself. She'ela Shalom, giving each other greetings. These are things that we limit on Tisha B'Av. We remove entirely. Learning Torah, we don't learn Torah on Tisha B'Av. Now, the reason we don't learn Torah on Tisha B'Av, which kind of is counterintuitive, right? Because you would think, as we've learned many times from the Rambam, that the whole purpose of learning Torah is in order to put yourself on, is in order to create a framework for your life of how to be a proper functioning human being. But there's also the advantage of learning Torah, and that it is Pekudei Hashem Yishar Mesam Chelev, that it gladdens the heart, that it makes it's gishmak to learn Torah. So therefore, on Tisha B'Av, we don't learn Torah. We have to just sit in our misery over the fact we don't have the Beis HaMikdash. So hopefully it'll put us on the path of Teshuvah, and then we can re-engage with the Torah on the 10th of Av, God willing, when now we'll be able to have come in with this fresh mindset and be able to learn Torah the appropriate way in order so that it can put us onto the right path, keep us on track in order to bring Mashiach and to bring the Geula Shlema, to bring the complete redemption. But there is an interesting halacha related to this year in particular. I want to just point out 2 halachas related to this year. Very, very interesting. We discussed them during in shul during the week a little bit, but I just want to see the sources inside and to discuss it a little more in depth, which is related to this year, where Tisha B'Av this year falls out on a Sunday, which means that it starts Motzei Shabbos, it starts Saturday night, which means that Erev Tisha B'Av is on Shabbos. Now, Erev Tisha B'Av is another one of the last of the 9 days where you still have those lighter restrictions before you get to Tisha B'Av, which obviously is everything plus the kitchen sink in terms of the mourning that we do during that time period and we take upon ourselves. But Erev Tisha B'Av, though, there are some things that we already start to take upon ourselves. For example, the general minhag is that Erev Tisha B'Av after midday, so we generally, the minhag is to not study Torah. Meaning we have the prohibition of studying Torah on Tisha B'Av itself. That's, as we mentioned before, because it's Pekudei Hashem Yishar Mesam Chelev, which if you look on page number 4, not by the arrow, but you take a look in the next set of halachos from the Shulchan Aruch on page 4, at the top by the bold, the Shulchan Aruch writes that on Tisha B'Av, Asar Berachitza V'Sicha V'Ne'ilas HaSandal V'Tashma Amita, that on Tisha B'Av one is not allowed to wash themselves, anoint themselves, wear leather shoes, have marital relations. V'Asar Likros B'Torah, you're not allowed to learn Torah, Nevi'im, Uksuvim. You're not allowed to learn Torah, Nevi'im, or Ksuvim. You're not allowed to Lishanos B'Mishnah U'B'Medrash U'B'Gemara. You're not allowed to learn Mishnah, Medrash, Gemara, B'Halachos, B'Agados, Halacha, Agada, you're not learning any Torah at all. Mishum, because Shenamar, Pekudei Hashem, Misharim Samchelev, because learning Torah gladdens the heart. Now, the Shulchan Aruch does say there are some things you can learn on Tisha B'Av, and that is anything that is Dvarim Hara'im, anything that is tragic Torah, meaning that it is related to the Churban Habayis, or the poskim add on anything that will keep you focused on what you're trying to accomplish from the day, which is teshuvah. So, for example, my Rebbe, one of my Rebbeim, Rav Meir Goldvich Shlita, he was our Masada Kedushin. So he always, every single Tisha B'Av afternoon, gives like this 3-hour Sichas Chaim, where he goes through, important ideas in framing proper Jewish conduct, of living a Jewish life, of that it's Musar in Yanim, it's to give direction. And so that's not what the Shulchan Aruch means when it says you're not allowed to learn things that will gladden the heart. That's very directive. It's very, like it's Musar. It's helping a person grow and create character perfection and development. But
Musar doesn't gladden the heart?
When you learn Musar, depends how you're learning it. Okay. But I think that it more should, or at least what it should do, is create a sense of introspection and reflection. That's the purpose of. Now, the result of that may be something that is gladdening, but it is, again, the purpose is to do teshuvah here, right? And that's part of your process for teshuvah. Yeah. So I think that's the link. So, but take a look at the Ramah over here at the top of the page. The Ramah, across from the arrow, the Ramah writes, Nagu shelo lilmod be'erev Tisha B'Av mechatzos ve'elech. The one on erev Tisha B'Av is not allowed to learn from midday on, except for that which is mutar on Tisha B'Av. Now, I think, generally speaking, the Minogue in Klal Yisrael is like that Ramah, that starting erev Tisha B'Av in the afternoon, we generally learn some more Musardik or Tisha B'Av related Torah, okay? But then he says, and therefore, this is the example now he gives, Imchal b'Shabbos, if Erev Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos, Ein Omrim Pirkei Avos. You don't learn Pirkei Avos. Now that's interesting. There is a minhag in Klal Yisrael that especially in the summertime, to learn Pirkei Avos on Shabbos afternoon. So many growing up, maybe you remember that was a minhag. It was a minhag in my shul also to learn Pirkei Avos on Shabbos afternoon in the summer. So hold on one second. So the Ramah's example here is Shabbos. That was probably a shir the Ramah would give, was a Pirkei Avos shir on Shabbos afternoon, but not if Erev Tisha B'Av fell out on Shabbos. So then he continues, and take a look at the last example. He says, V'chein, and also lo yitayel Erev Tisha B'Av. On Erev Tisha B'Av, you shouldn't go for pleasure walks. You shouldn't go for nice leisurely walks. That's, it's too enjoyable on Erev Tisha B'Av. So the question is whether or not everyone agrees to this opinion from the Ramah, because the Ramah is saying that not only is this something that will apply to Erev Tisha B'Av in general, but even if Erev Tisha B'Av is Shabbos. Now, Shabbos, generally speaking, we do not practice availas on Shabbos. That's, if you take a look on the next page, take a look on the next page for a second. The Shulchan Aruch is talking about Shalosh Shudas. When Erev Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos, like this year, he says, Im Chal Tisha B'Av Be'echad B'Shabbos, if Tisha B'Av falls out on Sunday, or Shechal B'Shabbos, V'nitchal Achar Shabbos, or Tisha B'Av fell out on Shabbos, and then we pushed it off to Sunday, O Chal Basar V'Shos Yayin, that you eat meat and drink wine, B'Seuda HaMafsekes, even at the Sudas HaMafsekes, meaning there is no Sudas HaMafsekes. There is no mourner's meal. You don't eat the bread with the ashes and the eggs sitting on the floor. It's Shabbos. Umala al shulchano afilu kasuda shlomo beis malchuso, that you should put on your table all of the fixings, everything, like your Shlomo HaMelech. Wow. Ramah adds on, obviously you need to stop eating before Shkia, because then that's when the fast begins by sundown. But But I don't understand. There's no availas on Shabbos. The Shulchan Aruch is making it very clear. There's no availas on Shabbos. Now the Magen Avraham says, if you at the bottom of the page in the Mishnah Berurah quotes this machlokes in the Magen Avraham and the Bechor Shor about whether or not you should, whether or not you could have shalosh shudas with company. That's an interesting discussion. The Magen Avraham thinks it's better to eat it alone, even though you could eat whatever you want. Better to eat it alone. The Bechor Shor says no, that would be an expression of aveilas. If you normally eat, we guess, right? You normally eat with other people. So especially like this community, everybody eats with each other. So that would be an expression of aveilas. If this Shabbos you didn't, we don't express aveilas on Shabbos. So then why is it, going back a page, why is it that the Rama would say that with regards to Shabbos, if it's Erev Tisha Above, the day before Tisha Above, in the afternoon, the Rama would say you can't learn Torah. Wouldn't that be an expression of aveilas on Shabbos? So that is why, take a look at the bottom of the page. That's why the third hour on the page, at the bottom, three quarters of the way down, the Mishnah Berurah says, that there are many achronim, many poskim that disagree with this minhag from the Chamoeh. That Rishon L'chol Harashal, the Marshal disagreed. The Marshal himself would learn on Erev Tisha B'Av if it fell on Shabbos in the afternoon, and he told others that they can do this also. Gam Hagra b'biuru. The Gra in his comments on Shulchan Aruch also said that this is a chumra yiserahi. This is way too much of a chumra from the Rama. V'chen Mamar Mordechai, the Mamar Mordechai as well, b'sifro ma'arich bezeh. Because of who maybe harbe lidei bitol Torah lahalomdim. It's going to lead to so much negligence of Torah that if we just stop all Torah learning. And he says that the ein adam lomed ela mashali b'chavetz. A person should learn whatever they want to learn. He thought it was perfectly permissible to learn this way because of the chen haya hu noe, that he himself would do exactly the same thing, that he would learn whatever he wanted throughout the day on Shabbos up until Tisha B'Av began. And also the Chai Adam. So like all the poskim are saying the Rama is totally off base here because we do not express aveilas on Shabbos. So what is the rationale for the Rama? Very good question. What's the rationale for the Rama? Rama also knew what he was talking about. All right. So what's the rationale for the Rama? So there's an amazing Chassam Sofer. Take a look on page number 6. The Chassam Sofer gives the following rationale. He writes, in the Tshuvas Chassam Sofer, Orach Chaim Simin Kuf Nun Vav, responsa number 156. Ula'anias daiti, across from the arrow, Ula'anias daiti, that in my humble opinion, Mishum, the reason why the Ramah writes that one is not allowed to learn Tisha B'Av in the Erev Tisha B'Av in the afternoon, Mishum de kol ma shelomed mechatzos ve'elach, because everything you're going to learn Tisha B'Av, Erev Tisha B'Av in the afternoon, Adayin machshevaso alav, you're just still going to be thinking about it. V'herhuru V'hirhu balayla, and you're going to be thinking about it Tisha B'Av night. As if to say, Torah learning is not confined to when the book is open. But even when the book is closed, and even when the shir is over, you're still thinking about the Torah that you learned. So therefore, says the Chassam Sofer, this is the rationale for the Rama. The Rama is saying that what's going to happen? You're going to learn up until Tisha B'Av starts, right? So then you're going to close your Gemara. You're looking at the time. Okay, you know what? It's 5 minutes to Shkia. Now let me close the Gemara. Let me go get one last sip of water, and then I'm going to begin my fast. What are you going to be thinking about that whole night? You're going to be learning about whatever you were learning. That's what you're going to be thinking about. Whatever it was that you were just learning. And therefore, says the Chassam Sofer, that's why the Rama says you have to stop earlier. Because it's not that there's an issue with it that you're of aveilas on Shabbos. No, this is nothing to do with Shabbos. This has to do with the fact that you are not going to be observing your aveilas properly once Shabbos is over, because you're still going to be thinking and learning. It's kind of like that Tosas and Brachos on Daf Yud Aleph. The Tosas talks about why is it that Birchas HaTorah we only make once a day. We learn Torah more than just once a day, but we make Birchas HaTorah in the morning, and that Birchas HaTorah covers us for the entire day. We don't make a Birchas HaTorah again. We don't make the blessing on the Torah every time we open up our Chumash, and every single time we open up a Mishnayos, and every single time we open up a Rambam and a Gemara, whatever it might be that you're going to be learning. Before every Shir, we don't make a Birchas HaTorah again. Why is it that we don't make a Birchas HaTorah every single time? If I'm going to, I eat in the Sukkah, says Tosos, and then I leave the Sukkah. So what happens when I come back to the Sukkah to have my next meal? I make another Leishib Sukkah, I make another bracha. So you should do the same thing with Torah learning. Every time I'm about to re-engage with Torah, once I stopped, I go to work, and then I come back at night, I should make another Birchas Torah. Says Tosos, no. Because the Jewish condition is that Torah is always on our minds, right? We started learning something, Torah is always on our minds. Even when we go to work, it's somewhere in our consciousness. Like the way that Rav Soloveitchik said it is that we have our acute awareness and our obtuse awareness. So it's somewhere back there. It's there. It's in our consciousness. It's always, we're engaged with it. And the second that we have the opportunity again, and we're going to come right back to it. So we never actually stopped. So it's the same idea that the Chassam Sofer is suggesting. This is what the Ramah was concerned about, and that's how the Ramah says we should stop in the afternoon. Now, the Chassam Sofer himself says that he feels that probably the best mode of action would be to learn. You could be a little bit more lenient in terms of the topics that you do study on Arif Tisha Above in the afternoon, but you should be related to Tisha Above in some way. So even learning Hilchos Tisha Above, for example, like learning what we're learning tonight. Even though it's geschmack, it's enjoyable, but at least what's going to happen if Tisha B'Av comes and you're still thinking about it, at least you're thinking about Tisha B'Av, right? So you are still holding on to it on some level. So that's what he recommends. That's what we're going to be doing. We're going to have a shir Shabbos afternoon before the fast begins, or while it's still Shabbos, even if after the fast begins. It's still Shabbos, and we'll be able to we'll learn in Yanei Tisha B'Av. We'll learn some Hilchos Tisha B'Av. And that way we'll be able to keep to the spirit of the day. We're not going to break that. So now, I want to,
Like if there's like a book, like course we have a book on Chumash. If you were to read that, would that be considered?
So would that be considered learning like Torah that you would be allowed to learn on Tisha B'Av?
No, that you wouldn't be allowed.
That you would not be allowed to? Yeah, I think so. I think that would be Torah you can't learn on Tisha B'Av. Yeah, the things that the things one can learn on Tisha B'Av proper is anything related to the destruction of the Churban Havayis, the destruction of the temple. So any of the topics that are found in the Nevi'im, that, like in Sefer Jeremiah, all of the Kinos, the Lamentations, Eicha, Sefer Eov, which is a very tragic book about Job. That one can learn on Tisha B'Av proper. It's a very long book. I once studied it throughout the entire day on Tisha B'Av. I was exhausted by the end of the day. It's 42 chapters. You wouldn't even know. 42 chapters is Job. It's very hard to understand why it's so long, because it's so repetitive. So much of it is very repetitive. But it's a very, very tragic tale. And again, books of Jewish, of Musar, of general topics in Jewish philosophy would also be a good thing to learn. Now, the Aruch HaShulchan has a very expansive view on this matter. He thinks that you can mamish learn anything related to tragedy at all, and you can learn it in its full depth. So I remember after I learned that Aruch HaShulchan, so me and a friend of mine, we asked a posek, and they thought that you could assume like that Aruch HaShulchan. So we set up a chavrusa for Tisha B'Av afternoon, and we learned the third perek of Meseches Moed Katan, which are all of the laws of availas, of mourning. And we were learning the Gemara with Rashi and Tosfos and the Rush and the Rambam. And we were like getting into heated discussions about it. And at some point we looked at each other like, it just doesn't seem, it just doesn't seem right. It was too
You're
geschmack.
too happy, right?
It was way too geschmack. Yeah, it was amazing. It was delicious Torah. So you have to find so I think that's why you keep to the topics that are really related to the destruction. There are Gemaras in Maseches Gittin, for example, that deal with all of the tragedies related to the Beis HaMikdash. So like at the shul, we're going to be having shiurim related to the day of Tisha Above and trying, to gain whatever mussar, whatever guidance we can from the tragedy. I think that's probably the best thing to do. And then, Mirz Hashem, after Tisha B'Av, we'll be able to go back to learning everything else. But, it is an interesting thing because we sometimes neglect those areas of Torah because they're not fun to learn, right? It's when was the last time we picked up Sefer Yirmiyahu, right? When was the last time we picked up Eov, right? But it's canonized as part of our Sifrei Tanakh. It's part of our Sifrei Kodesh, our holy books. We don't learn them on a regular basis. Tisha B'Av is a good day to reflect on the tragic parts of our Torah as well. Okay, I wanted to get to one more shtickle Torah here related to Tisha B'Av, and that is an amazing comment from the Minchas Chinuch. Just going to relate to another comment from the Chassam Sofer that's absolutely amazing. The Minchas Chinuch struggles with a question, which is, this year, Tisha B'Av falls out on Sunday. That's Tisha B'Av proper, is Sunday. More common is where you have Tisha B'Av fall out on Shabbos. This is very uncommon, where Arif Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos and then Tisha B'Av falls out on Sunday. That's very uncommon. More common is where Tisha B'Av proper falls out on Shabbos and we push it off to Sunday. That happens quite often. So what do? We push it off. Why do we push it off? Because we can't fast on Shabbos. I asked the Minchas Chinuch, why can't we fast on Shabbos? And I looked it up right before I came because I just wanted to, because it's an amazing Minchas Chinuch. So I looked it up right before I came at home. It's a mitzvah Shin Aleph, right at the end of the entry over there. So why can't we? Why don't we fast on Shabbos? Because it's Shabbos. Because it's Shabbos. That's why we don't fast. Hold on one second. Why don't we fast on Shabbos? So take a look at the Rambam, the beginning of the 30th Perek Lamed of Hilchos Shabbos. The Rambam writes, Arba Dvarim Namru B'Shabbos. That there are 4 mitzvos that we have on Shabbos. 4 mitzvos we have on Shabbos. Here, Joe. I'll pass it to Joe. Page 6. 4 mitzvos we have on Shabbos. Shnayim min haTorah, u'shnayim min divrei sofrim. 2 are from the Torah and 2 are from the rabbis. Ve'ein mufurashin al yedei hanavim, and they are spelled out by our neviim. So what are the 2 from the Torah? Sheb'Torah, Zachor v'Shamor. Zachor and Shamor, sanctifying Shabbos and observing Shabbos. The positive commandments of Shabbos, Kiddush, Havdalah, is related to Zachor. And then the negative commandments, Shamor, are the 39 Malachos. Then there are also 2 additional mitzvot that were established by the Nevi'im. V'shenisfarshu al yedei haNevi'im, kavod ve'oneg. Honoring Shabbos and enjoying Shabbos. Kavod, the Gra writes, is everything we do to prepare to honor Shabbos. So, for example, cooking the food before Shabbos, that is a fulfillment of the mitzvah of Kavod Shabbos. Oneg Shabbos is eating the food and enjoying it. Okay? So that's Kavod and Oneg. Shnei Amar, as the Navi tells us in Navi Yeshayahu, I believe, the Karas of Shabbos Oneg, the Likdosh Hashem Bechubad. That Karas of Shabbos Oneg, Navi tells us Shabbos, you need to enjoy yourself. The obligation to enjoy yourself on Shabbos, to have a Suda Shabbos, is from the Nevi'im. The obligation to fast is from the Navi Zechariah that we just pointed out. Tzom HaRavi, Tzom HaChamishi, Tzom HaShvi, Tzom HaAsiri, Yeleh B'Ziyud, L'Sosim L'Simcha. It's from the Nevi'im. Hold on one second. The obligation to fast is from the Nevi'im. The obligation to enjoy yourself on Shabbos is from the Nevi'im. Why does one beat the other?
One's about it, more important.
Who says one's more right? They're both from the Nevi'im.
The Shabbos trumps, right?
Shabbos from the Torah, yeah.
Right.
But this is both from the Nevi'im. Both from the Nevi'im.
Yeah, but I'm going to make the argument that the Nevi'im.
No, but we just learned before from the Rambam that fast days are also rooted in a deoraisa of chatzotros, that whenever a tragedy comes, so you, right? So they're both from the Nevi'im. They're of equal standing. They're of equal footing in halacha. Why does one beat the other? So says the Minchas Chinuch something amazing. Hold on one second. What is the obligation from the Nevi'im to fast? The obligation from the Nevi'im to fast is, again, the Navi Zechariah says, Tzom HaRavi, the fast of the 4th month. Tzom HaChamishi, the fast of the 5th month. Tzom HaShvi, the fast of the 7th month. Tzom HaAsiri, the fast of the 10th month. What day in those months are you supposed to fast? The Navi doesn't tell us. Our rabbis established which days. In fact, specifically related to Tisha Above, there's a machlokus in the Gemara as to whether or not it should have been on the 10th of Av, because most of the burning of the actual destruction of the temple happened on the 10th. The 9th is when it began to burn. But the 10th is really where most of the destruction actually happened. So maybe we should have established the fast day to be on the 10th, not the 9th. The Navi tells us it needs to be in the month of Av that we fast, to remember the tragedy of Av. But the Navi never actually tells us it needs to be on the 9th. That was a rabbinic enactment, to be on the 9th. So therefore, says the Minchas Chinuch, the karasa l'Shabbos oneg, eating and enjoying yourself is on Shabbos. The Navi tells us it needs to be on Shabbos, on that day in particular. You can't do it on Sunday and say that I'm enjoying myself on Shabbos. You can't do it on Monday and say I'm enjoying myself on Shabbos. It needs to be on Shabbos. When it comes to the fast day, if you don't fast on the 9th, you could still fulfill the obligation from the Nevi'im by fasting on the 10th. And then it was just the rabbinic enactment that it should be on the 9th. So the rabbinic enactment is not going to beat out the obligation from the Nevi'im to enjoy yourself on Shabbos. And that's how we push off Shabbos by 1 day. This relates to an amazing comment and explanation from the Chassam Sofer. And with this, we'll close. The Gemara in Tanis on the last page, on page number 7, the Gemara in Tanis tells us, Kol ha-mis'abel al Yerushalayim zoche v'roa b'simchasa. Anyone that mourns the destruction of Yerushalayim is zoche, is going to merit and is going to see Yerushalayim in its rebuilt state, in its simchadik state, in its state of joy. V'she'eino mis'abel Yerushalayim. And someone that does not mourn of the destruction of Yerushalayim, eino roa b'simchasa, is not going to see Yerushalayim in its rebuilt state. Take a look at the Shulchan Aruch at the bottom of the page. The Shulchan Aruch codifies this, and he says, Kol ha'ochel v'shosa b'Tisha Above, eino roa b'simchas Yerushalayim. Anyone that eats and drinks on Tisha Above is not going to see the joy of Yerushalayim. Anyone that mourns the destruction of Yerushalayim will see it in its rebuilt state. Ask the Chassam Sofer the following: Mirza Hashem haba aleinu l'tova, and Mirza Hashem, it should be this Tisha Above, God willing, that there is going to be the rebuilt Yerushalayim, and we are going to have the Beis Hamikdash, and we are not going to be fasting. So the question is that if, let's say, Tisha Above, God willing, will become a Yontiv, and this is going to be the first year, is going to be the first Yontiv. What's going to happen when the Yontiv falls out on Shabbos? The 9th of Av falls out on Shabbos. So when are we going to celebrate? When are we going to celebrate? So says the Chassam Sofer, based on this Gemara, we're going to be celebrating not on Shabbos. We're still going to push it off till Sunday. Why? Because the joy, the Yontiv, is coming to replace the mourning. That the joy is really the outbirth, the outgrowth, the result of the mourning that was put into it. That's the Gemara just taught us. That kol misabel, anyone that mourns, is going to be able to see Yerushalayim in its rebuilt state, meaning that they are going to be able to rejoice in it. So therefore, it says over, if we were mourning on Sunday, then that is when we're going to be rejoicing as well. It's not going to be based on the exact date. The significance of that date is only a rabbinic institution. The Navi, based on the Navi, remember the Navi is the significance is on the month. The mourning that took place during that month, whenever that mourning happened, that's when the joy is going to be taking place as well. It's related also to a Maharal. The Maharal writes, what do you mean? That anyone that mourns the destruction of Yerushalayim is going to see it in its rebuilt joyous state. Hold on one second. Let's say a person never cared 1 second about the destruction of Yerushalayim. They're not going to see pictures and WhatsApps and live Facebook streams from the big party taking place in Yerushalayim when the Beis HaMikdash is there. Of course they will. And if they got a ticket through El Al to go, or they live in Israel, they live in the old city of Yerushalayim and never observed Tisha Above once in their life, they're going to get kicked out? No. So says the Maharal, what does that mean? Of course they're going to see it. They're not really going to see it. In a roa, not bebinyana. What did the Gemara say? Bisimchasa. They're not going to see it in its joy. Because the joy of the Yantiv is only going to stem from how much it affected you in the fact that it wasn't here. How much you actually yearned for it. You missed it. How much you wanted it. That's where the simcha is going to stem from. So says the Maharal that, yeah, they're all going to see it, but it's not going to mean anything to them. It's not going to mean close to what it means to the person that cries on Tisha B'Av. The person that cries, that understands the destruction and what it means and the magnitude of it, and the fact that every single tragedy that continues to befall the Jewish people, as the Rambam just said before, the first Rambam we started with, every single tragedy that continues to befall the Jewish people is all a result and an offshoot of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, and the fact that we still are in Gullus. The person that understands that and appreciates that, that is the person that is going to be feeling the most joy when the Beis HaMikdash comes and the Geula is complete, God willing, hopefully soon. Okay, we will stop here for now. Wish everyone, if we are going to be fasting this Tisha B'Av, that I wish everyone an easy fast, and I hope that this Tisha B'Av will be dancing together in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh M'Her B'Yameinu. All right, we'll stop here. Shkoach.